You've made it through the day. However it unfolded, loud or quiet, smooth or uncertain, you're here now. You've found a quiet place to sit, maybe lying back a little, maybe adjusting your shoulders to let the tension go. You don't need to hold anything right now. You don't need to do or fix or chase anything. This moment is only for you. And you deserve a moment like this. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to feel heavy. You've carried enough. Let yourself slow down. There's nothing urgent here, nothing waiting to be solved or judged. Just a calm space to breathe, to listen, and maybe to feel something settle inside you. You've chosen to be here, not to escape, but to be present in a different way. To let your mind rest while still holding on to a quiet kind of clarity. That's something rare. Most people don't stop long enough to notice what they really feel. But you have. You've given yourself a little stillness, and that's enough. That's where real strength begins. You don't have to be perfect here. You don't have to understand everything or agree with every idea. Just let the words come in, gently, like the voice of someone who wants you to feel safe. Let your thoughts slow down, one breath at a time. You don't need to respond. You don't need to be on guard. You can soften. You can release. You're among quiet ideas now, the kind that don't demand anything from you, the kind that wait patiently until you're ready to hear them. And maybe tonight, some of them will reach you in just the right way. Not because you tried, but because you allowed yourself to rest. So come rest, truth seeker. You're exactly where you need to be. Not everything requires a response. That's one of the most powerful lessons in Stoic thought, and one of the most restful. In a world that often seems to demand our attention, our opinions, and our emotional involvement at every turn, the ability to pause, to simply not react, becomes a kind of quiet strength. This doesn't mean withdrawal or indifference. It means choosing carefully. It means knowing that not every spark needs to become a fire, and not every disturbance needs to enter your mind. The Stoics often reminded themselves of this. Epictetus, in his calm, steady way, taught that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the views we take of them. There is a small space between what happens and what we do next, and in that space is our freedom. When we fill that space with stillness instead of panic, with observation instead of immediate judgment, we find rest. The kind of rest that comes from not being pulled into every passing storm. Sometimes people speak harshly. Sometimes circumstances shift without warning. There are messages we don't like, noises we didn't ask for, people who expect more than we can give. And in each of those moments, a reaction rises quickly inside us. But the Stoics teach that we don't have to act on it. We can acknowledge it. We can let it move through, like a ripple on water. And then, we can let it go. You don't have to answer every provocation. You don't have to tighten your body every time something feels wrong. There is more peace in observing than in reacting. More power in restraint than in quick replies. This is not passivity. It is control. Quiet control. Grounded control. A kind of inner stability that says, I see this, I feel this, and I choose not to be pulled in. The more often we practice this, the more natural it becomes. When something frustrates us, we pause. When someone criticizes, we breathe. When anxiety builds over something beyond our reach, we gently remind ourselves, it's not in our hands. It doesn't belong to us. What belongs to us is how we carry ourselves. What belongs to us is the calm we protect inside. You don't need to fix every misunderstanding tonight. You don't need to explain yourself again and again. You don't need to step into every discussion, every disagreement, every flicker of tension. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply let it pass. Let it be what it is, while you remain still. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." These aren't the words of someone denying reality. They're the quiet confidence of someone who knows that perception shapes experience. And if you choose not to take something personally, not to carry it with you into the night, then you've already begun to lighten your load. You're allowed to rest from reacting. You're allowed to be still. The world will keep spinning whether or not you respond. The noise will rise and fall. But you can remain grounded, undisturbed. This is not easy. It takes time. But it begins with moments like this. Moments when you choose silence over defense, breath over tension, ease over control. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You're not responsible for every outcome. You don't need to hold every thread together. Some things unravel on their own. Some things resolve without you. Some things aren't yours to carry, even if they try to wrap themselves around your thoughts. In the quiet teachings of Stoicism, you'll find repeated encouragement to hold your center, not with force, but with awareness. To watch what happens around you and gently ask, does this really need a reaction? Is this urgent or just loud? Will this matter in a week or a month? And even if it does, will reacting in this moment bring clarity or just more noise? Sometimes the wisest thing to do is to rest your mind. Let the waves crash where they will, while you remain on the shore, dry and calm, knowing that stillness is not weakness. Stillness is wisdom practiced. You've already carried enough today. Whatever has stirred your emotions, whatever pulled your attention or unsettled your calm, you can let it go now. You don't need to carry it into the night. You don't need to sort it all out before sleep comes. There is time for that later. Now, there is space for quiet, for slowing down, for resting without needing to respond. You don't have to react to everything. That's not your task. Your task is to live with care, to reflect, to respond only when response brings clarity or compassion. The rest can wait, or fade away, and you can finally rest. So much of what weighs on us never really belonged to us in the first place. That's a quiet truth the Stoics returned to often. They observed how much suffering came not from what actually happened, but from our urge to control what cannot be controlled, from our habit of attaching ourselves to outcomes, to people's opinions, to the shifting winds of chance. And it's in that urge, that reaching, that we lose peace. Not because life is cruel, but because we're trying to manage what was never ours to manage. What happens outside of us is not our domain. The Stoics made this clear. The weather, the past, the thoughts and choices of others, the curve of fate, the course of time, all of it floats beyond our reach. And yet, so often, we press ourselves against it. We worry about what someone might say. We replay moments we cannot change. We plan and calculate, hoping to bend the future to our liking. And in doing so, we tighten ourselves against the current, instead of letting go. You don't have to hold so tightly anymore. Not everything needs to be carried. Not everything needs to be solved. There's freedom in remembering what is and what isn't, up to you. The Stoics taught that your only true concern is your own mind, your own choices, your own character. That's where your influence begins and ends. Everything else, the opinions of others, the outcomes of your actions, the rise and fall of circumstance, is beyond your control. And once you recognize that, you begin to loosen your grip on what was never yours to command. Imagine walking through a crowded market. People are speaking, moving, trading, reacting. You don't control their voices. You don't control the prices or the weather overhead. But you do control your steps. You choose where to look. You choose what to say and how to carry yourself. That's enough. That's all anyone truly owns. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It's not about detachment in the cold sense. It's not about shutting down or turning away from life. It's about clarity. The kind of clarity that lets you rest, that lets you say, "I've done what I can, and that is enough." Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to manage every outcome. You don't need to make everyone understand. People will think what they think. Events will unfold in ways no one can predict. Trying to control that is like trying to hold water in your hands. It slips through no matter how tightly you squeeze. And that effort, that squeezing, is what leaves you tired. When you begin to accept what's outside your control, you also begin to reclaim what's inside it. Your response, your attitude, your sense of peace. These are not small things. They're everything. They shape the quality of your life in ways the outside world never could. You may not be able to stop a storm from coming, but you can decide how you will meet it. This perspective doesn't ask you to be passive. It asks you to be wise. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care where it counts. Instead of scattering your energy across everything you cannot fix, you bring it home. You invest it in your habits, your tone, your patience, your willingness to stay present. That is where your life actually happens. You're allowed to let go of what's not yours to fix. You're allowed to stop chasing closure. Stop rewriting conversations in your mind. Stop predicting what might go wrong tomorrow. None of that will change what actually happens. But what you choose to focus on tonight, that will shape how you feel. That will shape how gently you fall asleep and how calmly you meet the next day. When you find yourself tangled in worry, ask yourself gently, is this within my control? And if it's not, let it pass. Let it drift. That's not neglect. That's wisdom in action. That's choosing peace over anxiety, clarity over confusion, rest over rumination. The world will keep moving. People will make decisions. Circumstances will rise and fall, but you can be steady. You can be soft without being weak. You can stop fighting what isn't yours to change. And in that softness, in that surrender, there's rest. A kind of rest that doesn't depend on silence or comfort or certainty. A deeper rest. The kind that comes from no longer arguing with life, from no longer clinging to what's slipping past, from knowing what's yours and what never was. So tonight, let it be simple. Let the world do what it does. Let others be who they are. And you, just be here, breathing, unwinding, returning to your center, where peace was waiting all along. There is a quiet wisdom in knowing when to let something end. The Stoics understood this deeply. They lived with the awareness that each day is a complete piece of life, not just a placeholder between what was and what might come. They treated each day as a whole, not a fragment. And when it was done, they practiced the gentle art of release, setting it down without carrying its weight into the next one. Most of us aren't taught to do that. We're taught to stretch our days out endlessly in our minds, replaying what went wrong, rehearsing what still needs to be said, holding on to what didn't go as planned. We lie down at night, but the day keeps talking. Its noise still hums in the background. Regrets echo. Tasks hover, and the mind keeps moving, even when the body has stopped. But it doesn't have to be that way. A day can be allowed to end, fully and without resistance. Just as we close a book after the final page, we can close a day after its final hour. Whatever it brought, success or struggle, connection or conflict, it is now behind you. Its time is complete. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Leave the past behind, let the future go, and live the present to the fullest in justice and truth." This wasn't about turning away from responsibility. It was about setting down what no longer needs to be held. You did what you could. You faced the hours as they came. And now the day is over. This is not denial. This is trust. Trust that you don't need to stretch this day into the night. Trust that rest is part of your strength. That reflection doesn't have to become rumination. That closure doesn't come from reviewing the same thoughts again and again, but from allowing stillness to settle where there was once motion. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Whatever conversations are unfinished, whatever plans didn't unfold as you hoped, they can rest now too. They don't need to follow you into sleep. They don't need to be sorted out tonight. Let the silence take them in. Let time carry them forward, if it must. But for now, let the day end. The Stoics knew that life is built not only on action, but also on renewal. And renewal can't happen if yesterday keeps trailing into today. That's why they practiced reflection, not as a burden, but as a gentle closing ritual. A moment to ask, did I live with intention? Did I stay true to my values? What did I learn, and what can I leave behind? These aren't harsh questions. They're quiet ones. They aren't meant to stir shame or pressure. They're meant to clear the path, to help you sleep with fewer knots in your mind, to help you turn the page cleanly, not tear it away. You're not meant to solve your whole life every night before bed. You're meant to rest. You're meant to let your thoughts slow. You're meant to allow your body to soften and your mind to dim its light, like a house preparing for sleep. Even the Stoic philosophers, with all their reflection and discipline, honored the need for stillness. They didn't push themselves through the night, chasing perfection. They gave their efforts during the day, and then they let go. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the hours behind you rest in their place. There is no need to chase them down or pull them into this moment. They've already happened. You don't need to carry them. There is a kind of dignity in ending the day fully, in saying to yourself, I did what I could, and now I stop. That kind of stopping is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's self-respect. It's understanding that life is made not only of striving, but also of stepping back. When the sun sets, it does not apologize. It simply lowers itself beneath the horizon. When a fire burns low, it doesn't question whether it gave enough light. It just lets the embers cool. You too can cool down now. You too can step out of the noise and return to your center. If there's tension in your chest or restlessness in your legs, that's okay. You don't have to fight it. Just notice it. Acknowledge that the day brought things that stirred you, and then let those stirrings settle, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. The Stoic way is not about forcing peace. It's about making room for it. Peace often comes when you stop chasing it. when you stop pressing against what was or what might be, and just allow the present moment to be enough. So now, let this day come to a close. Let it become whole, just as it was, unfinished, imperfect, real. You don't need to drag it forward. You don't need to hold it longer than necessary. Close your eyes when you're ready, and let the weight of this day stay behind. You've done enough. You are enough. The day is complete, and now you can rest. It's easy to confuse rest with weakness. In a world that often celebrates constant motion, stillness can feel unfamiliar. Doing less may seem like falling behind. But to the Stoics, rest was not the absence of purpose. It was a vital part of it. They understood that the mind and body need moments of pause, not just as a break from action, but as a way to restore the clarity that action depends on. Rest, to them, was not laziness. It was repair. We tend to measure our value by how much we accomplish, how many tasks we complete, how many hours we stay busy, how many steps we take without stopping. But even the wisest among the Stoics, those who taught resilience and discipline, knew that overexertion leads to distortion. The mind becomes cluttered, emotions fray, perspective warps. Without rest, we begin to mistake urgency for importance and activity for progress. Seneca once wrote, "The mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a good rest." He was not promoting indulgence. He was protecting strength. He knew that a tired mind makes poor decisions, that a worn body cannot carry wisdom well. Rest does not pull us away from our purpose. It brings us back to it, with more steadiness and more clarity. You don't have to earn your rest by reaching exhaustion. You don't need to be depleted before you're allowed to slow down. Rest is not something you receive as a reward. It's something you practice to remain whole. When you rest, you're not abandoning your path. You're maintaining your ability to walk it. The Stoics lived in times of stress and uncertainty, too. They navigated the collapse of empires, personal exile, illness, and betrayal. And yet, they carved out space for silence. They reflected. They returned to stillness, not just when life gave them peace, but especially when it didn't. They knew that strength was not about constant endurance. It was about rhythm, effort balanced with release, doing paired with being. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You've done enough for today. This moment doesn't ask for anything, not effort, not focus, just your willingness to stop and let your breath come and go on its own. Rest is not idleness. It's what allows you to recover the quiet strength that gets buried beneath fatigue. It's what clears the fog of urgency and makes space for patience again. When you sleep, when you lie still, when you allow your mind to drift without pressure, your body begins its quiet work of renewal. Your nervous system resets, your thoughts loosen, your attention returns to its center. That isn't failure, that's function. The Stoics didn't pretend the world could be controlled. They accepted its unpredictability, and part of that acceptance meant being ready for what came next. Rest was how they prepared, how they let go of what wasn't theirs to fix, and how they regained the calm to face what was. When you allow yourself to rest, you're not stepping away from your values. You're stepping deeper into them. You're saying, I want to meet life with care, and I know I can't do that if I'm running on empty. You're choosing to stop before the burnout comes, to soften before the tension hardens, to be kind to yourself in the same way you would be kind to someone you love. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to prove your worth through non-stop effort. You already are enough, even in this quiet moment, even with your eyes closed and your hands still. Rest is not retreat, it's nourishment. It's how the roots of your mind grow deeper, how your energy returns without force. It's how you become more capable, not less. The more gently you allow yourself to rest, the more calmly you'll rise when the time comes. And it will come. There will be moments ahead when your strength will be needed again. But that's not now. Now is for stillness, for the slow return to balance, for letting yourself be a person, not just a function. So breathe gently. Let the day drift away. Let your thoughts wander without direction. There is no urgency in this moment, no task waiting, no judgment watching. Only the simple truth that rest is not a pause in your life. It's part of it. This is your time to repair, to come back to yourself, to fall asleep not because you gave out, but because you chose to care for what keeps you going. Let that care begin now, quietly, fully, without apology. There is a strength in silence that often goes unnoticed. It's not loud. It doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't try to win the moment or fill the space. But it holds its ground. It listens instead of interrupts. It observes instead of reacts. In the Stoic tradition, silence was never emptiness. It was presence. A grounded, steady presence that allowed reason to rise without being clouded by noise. The world pulls us toward constant expression. We're encouraged to respond, to explain, to defend, to make ourselves heard. But the Stoics saw something different. They knew that truth didn't need to be repeated again and again to exist. That the wise often speak less, not because they lack opinions, but because they've learned to wait. They've learned that much of what stirs us in the moment fades quickly, that not everything deserves a reaction, and not every thought needs to be shared aloud. Seneca wrote, "Speech is like life itself. It is a privilege, and not to be wasted." His view of speech was careful, deliberate. He didn't fear conversation, but he respected silence. Silence gave him room to reflect before responding, to pause before speaking from emotion. It wasn't just about being quiet, it was about choosing when words were truly needed. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to explain yourself tonight. You don't need to find the right thing to say or rehearse the conversations that didn't go as planned. Let your words rest with you. Let your voice soften, inside and out. Silence gives your mind the chance to settle. When you stop chasing sound, your thoughts begin to stretch out and breathe. You become more aware, not only of what's around you, but of what's inside you. The still parts, the tired parts, the calm beneath the surface that often gets overlooked in the rush to speak or respond. The Stoics didn't see silence as withdrawal. They saw it as mastery, the kind of strength that doesn't flinch under pressure, the kind that chooses patience over performance. When you sit quietly, you're not avoiding the world. You're meeting it from a place of stability. You're giving yourself space to respond from intention instead of habit. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to solve everything with words. You don't need to carry every conversation in your head. The silence you enter now is not a void. It's a return to clarity, to the quiet inner place where nothing is demanded of you, where no performance is necessary. There is peace in not having the last word, in watching a moment pass without needing to shape it. That kind of restraint doesn't weaken your influence. It deepens it. People may forget what you said, but they remember how calmly you held yourself when others rushed in. They remember that you didn't panic when things grew loud. The Stoics taught that our power lies not in controlling what others do, but in choosing how we respond. And often, the strongest response is silence, not in anger, not in withdrawal, but in peace, in confidence, in the kind of patience that only grows through practice. Silence also allows us to hear ourselves more clearly. When the outer world dims, the inner world becomes more visible. That's when you notice the tensions you've been holding, the unspoken worries, the tired thoughts you've been trying to reason through all day. In silence, those things can rise to the surface, not to overwhelm you, but to be acknowledged and then released. You don't need to be on alert anymore. Not here, not now. The day is done. The discussions are done. Let yourself return to the quiet that lives underneath the doing. That quiet has been with you all along, waiting to be heard. The Stoics believed in living in harmony with nature, and silence is part of that rhythm. Even the earth quiets at night. Even rivers slow in winter. Even the stars say nothing. And yet, all of it continues. Nothing breaks. Nothing is lost. Rest does not come from endless thought or speech. It comes when we stop pushing and allow the mind to rest in quiet understanding. This moment is yours now. You don't need to prepare anything. You don't need to anticipate what might come next. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath ease. Let silence surround you without fear. It's not a punishment. It's a gift. In silence, there is safety. There is dignity. There is space to repair, to reflect, to simply be. The Stoics didn't seek silence to disappear. They sought it to return to themselves, to remember what truly mattered when the world had too many voices speaking at once. So stay here a little longer. Let yourself be quiet without needing a reason. You are not missing anything. You are not falling behind. You are simply resting in the strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. And as you lie still, as your thoughts begin to drift and soften, remember, silence is not absence. It is presence, the most complete kind, the kind that asks nothing from you, only that you rest. Most people think that doing more means living more, that if you stay busy enough, productive enough, involved in everything, you're truly making use of your time. But the Stoics saw things differently. They believed that doing less, intentionally, thoughtfully, calmly, often leads to a richer, more meaningful life. Not because activity is bad, but because unchecked activity can pull you away from what really matters. The mind tires when it's stretched too thin, when the day is packed with tasks and thoughts are split between responsibilities. The sense of presence begins to fade. You might accomplish many things and still feel distant from your own life. It's not that you're not trying. It's that your attention is scattered. The Stoics noticed this. They saw that a life filled with unnecessary obligations becomes heavy. And that kind of weight keeps you from resting well, from thinking clearly, from feeling the depth of simple moments. To do less isn't about being lazy. It's about being selective. It's about letting go of what's not essential so that what truly matters can breathe. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often to act only when necessary, and to act in harmony with reason. His version of simplicity wasn't plain. It was wise. It was careful, not cluttered. Calm, not chaotic. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't have to keep chasing after everything. Life will not collapse if you step back from what drains you. In fact, it may begin to feel clearer, lighter, more peaceful. When you do less, you begin to see more. You begin to notice what you've been rushing past. The Stoics practiced a kind of quiet discipline. They filtered their commitments. They asked themselves if what they were doing contributed to virtue, to character, to peace of mind. If it didn't, they let it go. That letting go wasn't weakness, it was clarity, and clarity leads to rest. Busyness often feels like purpose, but it can be a distraction. It can fill the space where thought and reflection should be. The kind of living that asks you to be everywhere at once, saying yes to everything, doesn't always lead to joy. It leads to depletion. But when you stop measuring your worth by how much you do, and instead start asking whether what you do brings you closer to peace, then your life begins to soften, to simplify, to settle. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to finish everything tonight. You don't need to justify your rest. The world will still be there when you wake. But for now, allow yourself to be still. You are not falling behind. You are coming back to yourself. Doing less means making space for presence, for awareness, for rest. It means no longer rushing through conversations, through meals, through thoughts. It means allowing one thing to matter at a time. That kind of attention, that kind of presence, is what the Stoics pointed toward. It's how they practiced living well, not just surviving, not just completing tasks, but living well. A calm life isn't empty. It's full in a different way. It's full of meaning, not noise, of connection, not distraction. When you do less, you notice more. The way your breath feels as it slows, the way your thoughts ease when there's no pressure to act, the way sleep comes more easily when your day has not been overstuffed with movement. The Stoics weren't against action. They were against waste. Wasted energy, wasted emotion, wasted time. To them, time was sacred, and protecting it wasn't selfish. It was necessary. They didn't rush to fill the calendar. They didn't seek out every opportunity to be seen. They understood that every moment spent on something meaningless was a moment lost from something that could have brought real calm, real growth, real peace. You're allowed to choose a slower pace. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to want fewer things, to take fewer steps, to need less from the world around you. Simplicity isn't emptiness, it's focus. It's choosing what really matters and releasing the rest. Even now, in this quiet moment, you're practicing that principle. You're doing less by simply listening, by simply resting, by not forcing your mind into motion. And in doing less, you're allowing more of what matters to reach you. A little more peace, a little more clarity, a little more room to breathe. So let the tension fall away from your shoulders. Let your breath move slowly. Let this night be light. You don't need to prove anything here. There is nothing urgent, nothing missing. You have done enough. To do less is not to shrink. It's to return to what is essential. And the essential things, peace, presence, rest, require space. You've given yourself that space tonight. And in that choice, you're living fully, quietly, simply, enough. Tiredness doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It doesn't mean you've failed. It doesn't mean you didn't try hard enough or manage things correctly. It simply means you've spent energy, mental, physical, emotional, on things that asked something of you. That's all. Tiredness is not a flaw in your character. It's a natural result of effort. And to the Stoics, effort guided by virtue was never wasted. They didn't shame themselves for needing rest. They didn't believe that exhaustion was something to hide or ignore. Instead, they treated it as a sign. a quiet reminder to pause, to recover, to return to themselves. Seneca once wrote that even wise people grow weary. Wisdom does not eliminate fatigue. It helps you meet it with calm understanding. Tiredness shows up in different ways. Sometimes it's the heaviness in your limbs after a long day. Sometimes it's the fog in your thoughts when too much has happened. Sometimes it's the quiet ache of caring deeply about things you can't quite control. And sometimes it's just the ordinary truth of being human, of living in a world that pulls on your attention, asks for your presence, and moves faster than you'd like. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to resist your tiredness as if it's something shameful. Let it be what it is, a message, not a problem. A signal that you've given something of yourself today. That's not weakness, that's life. The Stoics believed in meeting life with courage and discipline, but they also knew that even the strongest person must eventually rest. Marcus Aurelius led an empire, wrote his thoughts in the early hours, faced loss and war and public expectation. And even he reminded himself, gently and without pride, to step away when needed. "When you arise in the morning," he wrote, "think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive. But do not resent rest. Do not deny the body what it needs." To them, the body was not a burden to push past. It was part of your responsibility. Caring for it, listening to its tiredness, was part of living in alignment with nature. And nature includes weariness. It includes nighttime. It includes letting go. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let go of the idea that being tired means you haven't done enough. You are not a machine. You are not measured by how much you can endure without pausing. You're allowed to reach the end of the day and feel worn out. That doesn't mean something went wrong. It means you've lived through something. The Stoic path was not about perfection. It was about presence, about returning again and again to clarity, even if the steps were imperfect. And sometimes clarity sounds like this: "I'm tired. I need to rest." That's enough for today. If you felt scattered, or slow, or overwhelmed, there's no need to turn those feelings into judgment. The Stoics didn't cling to emotion, but they didn't deny it either. They watched it, acknowledged it, and let it pass. The same can be done with tiredness. Recognize it. Let it be here. Let it soften you. This is not the time for planning or fixing or performing. It's not a time for questions or criticism. It's a time to return to stillness. To lie down with the simple truth that you've carried enough for one day. You don't need to force energy where there is none. You don't need to feel alert to be worthy of peace. Sometimes peace comes when you stop striving for it. Tiredness is not a sign that you've failed to be stoic. It's a reminder that even Stoics are human, and that being human means cycles of effort and pause, motion and stillness, wakefulness and sleep. There is no shame in being worn out. Only a gentle nudge to listen more carefully, to treat yourself with the same calm regard the Stoics reserved for all things natural. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to rest. And you don't need to justify that to anyone, not even to yourself. Let the pressure ease. Let your body settle. Let your thoughts slow until there's nothing left to do but breathe. You've made it through this day. That's enough. Whatever remains unfinished can wait. Whatever you hoped to do differently can be met tomorrow, with a rested mind and a quieter heart. But for now, all that's asked of you is to lie still, to let the soft tiredness in your body become something gentle, instead of something to fight. This moment isn't about pushing through. It's about letting go. Not because you've given up, but because you understand what the Stoics did, that nature has its rhythm, and tiredness is part of that rhythm. It's not a problem to solve. It's a wave to lie down in. So rest now, fully, freely, without guilt, without explanation. The day is done. You are here, and that is enough. There's a quiet exhaustion that settles in when someone believes they must keep everything from falling apart. When the mind starts tracking every detail, every risk, every change in tone or shift in plans. That kind of weight isn't always loud. It often hides behind responsibility, or care, or the simple urge to keep others from feeling disappointed. But the Stoics would have gently reminded us, the world is not yours to carry, and it was never meant to rest on your shoulders alone. They understood the impulse, to protect, to manage, to intervene, but they also understood the cost. When you try to hold the world together, your own inner world begins to fray. You lose sleep, not because something has gone wrong, but because you've convinced yourself you must be the one to keep things right. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The world turns, whether you are worrying or resting. Other people's thoughts will rise and fall on their own. Circumstances will continue to shift, and your value doesn't come from controlling any of it. You are not the axis upon which everything must turn. You are a person with limits, with needs, with the right to let go. The Stoics believed in doing what was within one's control and releasing the rest. Epictetus spoke often about the freedom that comes when you learn to separate what is yours from what is not. Your thoughts, your choices, your values, those are yours. But the outcomes, the judgments of others, the events of the day, those belong to the wider world, and they are not your burden to hold through the night. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You are not failing by stepping back. You are not abandoning anyone by resting. What needs to happen will unfold in time, with or without your constant attention. And what truly matters, your character, your inner peace, your sense of presence, will not be strengthened by overextending yourself. It will be nurtured in calm, steady care. So much of the pressure we feel is unspoken. It comes from wanting to be useful, dependable, needed. And yet, even those who care about you don't ask you to carry everything. Often, it's you asking yourself to do more than is necessary. But even the Stoics, who faced war, exile, political duty, and public responsibility, knew when to rest their minds. They practiced detachment not to be cold, but to stay grounded, to preserve their ability to think clearly and act wisely. There is no badge for sleepless nights spent rehearsing conversations, no reward for trying to solve problems that haven't yet happened, and no peace in believing that if you don't step in, everything will fall apart. The truth is more gentle than that. Things fall apart sometimes, even with your effort, and sometimes they come back together without it. The Stoic view of life made room for imperfection. They didn't seek control, they sought resilience. They didn't aim to eliminate struggle, they aimed to meet it with grace. And grace is easier to find when you're not stretched thin, when you're not grasping at every loose thread, trying to tie it all back into order. Let go of the thought that your rest must be earned. Let go of the idea that you are needed in every moment, in every decision, in every space. You are not turning away from life by resting. You are choosing to remain whole within it. Even now, Your breath moves without being told. The night carries on without your guidance. Let your mind follow that rhythm. Let go of the roles and responsibilities for a while. You'll return to them with more steadiness when you've rested. But not now. Now is for softening, for placing the pieces down, for remembering that what's broken isn't yours to mend in the dark. You don't need to hold the world together. The world was never asking that of you. What it needs, more than anything, is for you to stay well, to return to your center, to sleep when you're tired, to pause when you're overwhelmed, to give space to your own healing. That kind of care does more good than any control ever could. The Stoics trusted in the order of things, in the way events rise and fall beyond our grasp. They didn't wait for everything to be perfect before they allowed themselves to rest. They simply asked, "What is mine to do?" And once they had answered that, they stopped. Not because there was nothing more to be done, but because there was nothing more that they could do. And that's enough. You've done what you could. You've carried what was yours. And now you can set it down. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to apologize for needing rest. The world will be all right without your constant supervision. And you'll be all right too. So lie back. Let the weight shift. Let your body soften into the quiet. The day is over. The world continues. And you are finally free to rest. When a person chooses to rest, there's often a quiet voice in the background whispering that something will be missed, that time is being wasted, that progress is slipping away. But this is only a trick of a tired mind, a habit picked up from a world that treats stillness like absence. The Stoics saw it differently. They knew that when rest is taken with intention, nothing essential is lost. In fact, what matters most is often recovered there. Rest doesn't undo effort. It doesn't erase growth or slow down meaning. It gives those things space to deepen. Like soil settling after a long day of tending, the mind and body need time to absorb what's been done. They need quiet to make sense of movement. Without that quiet, even the most purposeful action becomes scattered. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to be busy with activities that aren't necessary, because they crowd the mind and erode clarity. Rest is not an interruption to life. It's part of a life lived wisely. The Stoic path was never about constant exertion. It was about balance, about protecting what is valuable, not by pushing through fatigue, but by knowing when to pause. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is nothing slipping away in this moment. The things that truly matter, your peace, your character, your ability to return with presence, are not measured by your speed. They wait for you, even now. They aren't lost just because you've chosen to lie down and be still. In a tired state, it's easy to imagine the world moving ahead without you. Conversations continuing, tasks piling up, expectations forming. But what happens outside your rest is rarely as urgent as it feels. Most things can wait. Most pressures shrink with time. And those that don't, those that truly call for you, will still be there when you wake, and you'll be more prepared to meet them. The Stoics were not idle people. They acted with conviction and purpose, but they knew that wisdom required a certain distance from constant noise, a stillness to reflect before acting, a rhythm that respected the body and the mind. When they stepped away from the world's urgency, they weren't retreating. They were anchoring themselves in something deeper, something calm and unshaken. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to track every hour, every task, every possible outcome. What's meant to find you will not pass you by, simply because you closed your eyes for a while. What's fragile enough to vanish while you rest is not something worth chasing. In rest, your thoughts begin to sort themselves out. Emotions soften. Memory becomes gentler. The mind is given a chance to breathe, without needing to perform or defend or solve. You don't need to do more to keep your life on track. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is to do nothing at all, for a little while. There is no value in pushing past your limits for the sake of appearance. The Stoics would have called that vanity, not virtue. They were far more concerned with the state of your inner life. And that inner life, like anything living, needs care. It needs rest. When you sleep tonight, you are not falling behind. You are not losing momentum. You are maintaining the quiet strength that allows you to return to your path with clearer eyes and steadier hands. There is dignity in that, a kind of quiet confidence in stepping away, not because you're avoiding life, but because you understand how to meet it fully. Even now, with the day behind you and the night unfolding, nothing important is being lost. The sun has set. The conversations have paused. The world is dimming. Let yourself dim with it. Let your mind grow quieter, without fear. You are not wasting time. You are caring for the one who lives through time, yourself. The Stoics often spoke of nature's rhythm, of the turning of seasons, the rising and falling of days. They saw rest as part of that rhythm, not a disruption, but a continuation, a necessary phase in the cycle of living well. The tree does not lose itself in the winter. It gathers strength. The tide does not fail when it recedes. It prepares to return. So let yourself recede for now. Let yourself pause. Let sleep come gently. Everything meaningful remains. Everything important can wait. And you can rest. Fully, freely, without worry, without loss. When the mind is unsettled, even simple things become unclear. Decisions feel heavier, words sound sharper, and small problems seem larger than they really are. But as the Stoics often reminded themselves, clarity doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from quieting the noise inside. A calm mind sees more clearly, not because it knows everything, but because it's no longer reacting to everything. It waits. It observes. And only then does it choose what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He didn't mean that the outside world would stop demanding attention. He meant that within us, there's a place that remains steady, if we learn how to return to it. And we return by stepping back from the rush, by softening the tension, by remembering that clarity grows in stillness, not in stress. When the mind is stirred by urgency, it rushes to fix what hasn't even happened yet. It leaps into assumptions, turns small uncertainties into imagined threats, and tries to manage too many thoughts at once. But that kind of mental noise doesn't lead to better choices. It leads to confusion, to fatigue, and often to regret. The Stoics knew that peace is not the reward for solving everything. It's the starting place for seeing what needs to be solved at all. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You are not required to have all the answers tonight. You don't need to sort through every thought before you rest. What feels tangled right now will loosen with time and with calm. Most problems are not as urgent as they seem when you are tired. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let your thoughts drift without chasing them. Let your breath become your focus for now. When you slow down like this, something begins to shift. You stop reacting to the world and begin to notice it. You begin to see what is actually in front of you, not just what your mind projected in the haze of exhaustion. The Stoics encouraged this kind of inner distance, not detachment from life, but perspective within it. They practiced separating what was true from what was emotional noise. They knew that a calm mind doesn't mean a passive mind. It means a prepared one. A mind that's clear is a mind that can respond with wisdom, rather than reflex. In that clarity, there's room to ask better questions, to wonder what's really needed, instead of just responding to the loudest pressure. You begin to notice that not every problem is yours to fix. Not every thought is yours to believe. And not every feeling needs to be turned into action. Calmness gives you the space to sort through all of that gently. Even in moments of difficulty, the Stoics taught themselves to step back first. Epictetus often reminded his students to pause before judging, before reacting. That pause wasn't about delay. It was about grounding. When the mind is calm, it's not distracted by imagined futures or replayed conversations. It returns to the present moment, where most answers live, where rest can happen. Calm does not mean silence. It does not mean an empty mind. It means the thoughts are no longer pulling you in every direction. They're still there, but softer, less demanding. You can listen without being overwhelmed. You can choose which ones deserve your energy and which can pass. This kind of calm is not always easy to find in the middle of the day. But now, as the world quiets around you, you have the chance to return to it. You don't need to fix your thoughts. Just notice them. You don't need to resist them. Just let them come and go without effort. Even the Stoics had restless minds, but they practiced bringing them back, not by force, but with care, by returning to what they could control and releasing what they couldn't, by remembering that clarity grows slowly, like light in the early morning. It does not arrive through pressure. It comes with stillness, with space, with rest. So breathe. Let the day fall away. Let your shoulders settle. What is unclear now may become simple by tomorrow. What feels urgent may feel distant. You don't need to rush the answers. They will arrive in their own time. What matters most is that you're making space for them, by resting your mind, by softening your grip, by allowing clarity to come when it's ready. A calm mind sees clearly, and in this moment, that clarity begins with letting go. Not forever, just for now. Just long enough to rest. Long enough to remember that you are not your worries. You're not your plans. You're a person who has done enough today and who deserves to sleep in peace. Let the world continue. Let your thoughts drift. Let yourself be still. There is nothing more to do tonight, and everything that matters will wait. Sometimes the mind offers thoughts that feel urgent or heavy, and it's easy to believe they define who you are. But the Stoics understood something very different. They knew that thoughts come and go, often without invitation, often without logic, and that while you may notice them, you do not have to become them. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them, the one who decides what to accept and what to let pass. This space between thought and identity is where peace begins. It's where the mind stops being a storm and becomes a sky. Not because the thoughts disappear, but because they're no longer mistaken for truth. You can witness a worry rise up and still choose to remain still. You can feel a regret appear and gently let it drift by. You don't need to wrestle with every idea that crosses your mind. You only need to decide which ones are useful and which are not. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again that the mind can be trained to stop reacting to every impression. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But that power doesn't come from control. It comes from awareness, from noticing what enters your thoughts and choosing not to grab onto all of it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is no need to chase your thoughts in circles tonight. You are not what you think when you're tired. You are not the passing worries of the moment. You are the awareness underneath them. Quiet, steady, and far more spacious than the thoughts themselves. The Stoics knew that thoughts are shaped by habit, by emotion, by memory. Many of them aren't rational. Many aren't even yours in a meaningful way. They're echoes of old experiences, patterns picked up from others, or reactions that never got resolved. To treat every thought as a fact is to give away your calm. To observe without attachment is to keep it. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let your thoughts come and go without asking them to stay or trying to push them away. They don't define your worth. They don't measure your strength. They're simply activity, natural and passing, like breath. Even unpleasant thoughts are not a failure. They're just part of being human. The Stoics didn't expect to always think clearly. They expected to notice when they didn't. And in that noticing, they found room to return, to come back to calm, to remember that what mattered was not the thought itself, but the choice that followed. Right now, you don't need to sort through all of your thinking. You don't need to correct anything. You can let your mind soften. Let your awareness rest. Let your attention move from the words in your head to the feeling of your breath, to the heaviness in your limbs, to the quiet unfolding of rest. Thoughts may continue to arise, but you can watch them without following. You can acknowledge them without inviting them in. This kind of mental space, this gentle separation, is what allows peace to grow, not through effort, but through stillness, not through analysis, but through acceptance. The Stoics believed in shaping their thoughts, yes, but only after they had stepped back from them. Only once they were no longer overwhelmed. That space allowed them to choose, and in choosing, they created a life of stability, clarity, and inner freedom. So tonight, allow that same space for yourself. Let the thoughts be what they are, without judgment. They don't need to disappear for you to rest. They just need to lose their grip. And that happens when you stop feeding them with attention. You are not your thoughts. You are the quiet that sees them. You are the calm that remains even when the mind is restless. That calm is always there. It may be covered at times, but it's never gone. It's the part of you that pauses before reacting. The part that still listens, even when things feel loud. The part that remembers how to rest. Let the day end now. Let the mind unwind without needing to explain itself. Whatever thoughts remain can fade into the background, like a conversation in another room. They're not needed here, not now. What's needed is your breath, your rest. Your return to the steady place within you that never leaves, even when thoughts come and go. You've done enough. You've thought enough. Now it's time to let yourself fall into sleep without trying to think your way there. The world will be here when you wake. Your mind will be clearer. And the thoughts that matter will rise with the morning. But tonight, you are allowed to simply be, to rest. Not because your thoughts are quiet, but because you no longer mistake them for yourself. There's a point in every day when the body begins to ask for stillness. Muscles grow heavy, movements slow, even the breath settles into a quieter rhythm. These signals are not weakness, they are wisdom. Clear and steady reminders that the body, like anything living, cannot give without pause. And just as the body asks for rest, so does something deeper. The soul, the quiet part of the self that carries emotion, memory, and meaning, also needs time to retreat and restore. The Stoics understood this well. They lived with discipline, but never at the expense of self-care. They did not confuse constant motion with strength. To them, strength included knowing when to step back, when to listen inward, when to stop pushing and allow the natural rhythm of the body and the soul to guide the way. Seneca once wrote, "The mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a good rest." He didn't separate the mind from the rest of the person. He saw clearly that recovery was necessary, not just for the body's energy, but for the clarity of thought and the resilience of spirit. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There's no need to resist what your body is telling you. No reason to keep yourself upright out of habit or guilt. You've given what you could today. And now your body asks to lie down, to release its tension, to soften. Listen to it. Trust it. This rest is not a break from your life. It's part of caring for it. The soul carries more than we often realize. It holds quiet doubts, soft griefs, hopes that haven't yet found their shape. It holds questions that have no quick answers. And just like the body, it becomes tired. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes soul tiredness shows up as irritation, as restlessness, as feeling stretched without knowing why. And nothing heals that kind of weariness like stillness, like quiet, like allowing yourself to be exactly where you are, without needing to explain or perform. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let your body rest, and let your soul breathe. There is nothing to prove in this moment, no role to fill. You are allowed to be still, not because everything is perfect, but because stillness is what keeps you whole. The Stoics didn't rush to fix everything before they rested. They knew the value of returning to themselves before re-entering the world. They practiced quiet reflection, not just to grow wiser, but to stay centered, to make sure their choices came from clarity, not from exhaustion. Rest was not indulgence. It was preparation. It was protection. When the body is tired, it speaks clearly. When the soul is tired, it whispers. And part of rest is learning to hear both, not to fear them, not to push them away, but to listen, to treat them with care. This kind of listening is not dramatic. It's slow, gentle. It happens in the quiet space where nothing is asked of you, where you can finally say, "This is enough for today." Even now, as you lie back and begin to soften, you're honoring something that matters. You're choosing not to ignore the natural limits that come with being human. The Stoics would have seen this as wisdom, knowing that effort without rest leads to confusion, to mistakes, to imbalance. They believed that caring for yourself was not a retreat from your principles, but a way of protecting them. The soul, when rested, holds peace more easily. It meets difficulty with patience. It returns to kindness, to thoughtfulness, to quiet confidence. But when it's drained, even small things become overwhelming. Rest is what clears the path again. It doesn't erase the challenges, but it makes you more capable of facing them with grace. So rest now. Let the body feel supported. Let the soul feel safe. Let both settle into the stillness they've earned. There is no pressure here, nothing more to understand. Just the gentle truth that you are allowed to rest. Fully, completely, without apology. The day is done. The work is behind you. The body has asked, and now you are answering. The soul has waited, and now you are listening. Nothing important will be lost in this rest, but something essential will be restored, and in that restoration there is calm, there is clarity, there is space for you to come back to yourself, slowly, softly, without rushing, without expectation. Let the breath move freely. Let the weight of the day fall away. This is your time now, not to achieve, but to return. To remember that both the body and the soul are part of the life you're shaping, and both deserve your care. Let everything else go. You are here, you are safe, and you can rest. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop reaching into tomorrow, when you stop measuring your day against what's left undone or what didn't go as planned. The Stoics believed that this day, just as it is, can be enough, not because it was perfect, not because it fulfilled every goal, but because it existed and you were present for it. That alone is worthy of recognition, and it's more than enough to rest on. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often that life is lived one moment at a time. Confine yourself to the present, he wrote, not as an escape from the future, but as a return to what is real and within reach. He didn't ignore what might come tomorrow, but he didn't let it rob him of what was already here. Living as if today is enough doesn't mean ignoring responsibility. It means not letting your worth be measured only by what comes next. Many people move through their days with a quiet tension, an invisible urgency that says today isn't quite complete, not until something more is done, something more is gained. But that kind of restlessness wears the mind down. It turns rest into guilt and sleep into hesitation. The Stoics taught a different path, a way of seeing today as a whole, not a waiting room for something better. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You've done enough for now. Let your body feel the weight of this day. Let your mind stop searching for the next step. You're not falling behind by resting. You're simply recognizing that you've already arrived. Living as if today is enough means letting go of the pressure to be more, to earn more, to do more before you're allowed to pause. It means understanding that you are already living a full life, even if it's quiet, even if it's not where you thought you'd be, even if there are things still unfolding. You don't have to reach a finish line to allow yourself peace. You just have to stop chasing every hour as if it's slipping away. The Stoics knew how fragile time could be. They reminded themselves often that tomorrow isn't promised, that control is limited, that all we ever truly have is this present breath, this present thought, this present moment. And when you live with that awareness, not in fear, but with care, you begin to see the beauty in what's already here, not because it's grand, but because it's real. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to stretch this day into something more. Let it be what it is. Let yourself accept it, even with its imperfections, with the loose ends, even with the questions that didn't get answered. There is strength in saying, this was enough. Not because you've settled, but because you've learned to stop running, because you've realized that worth isn't something earned at the end of a perfect day. It's something you carry with you, always. When you treat today as enough, you stop waiting for some future version of yourself to feel rested, or fulfilled, or whole. You begin to see that those things are not found later. they are practiced now, in the way you slow down, in the way you care for yourself, in the way you give yourself permission to stop. The Stoic life was not about constant striving. It was about wise action, balanced with reflection. It was about knowing when to push and when to pause. And most importantly, it was about returning to what is, again and again. Not to fix it, but to appreciate it. Tonight, you are allowed to stop reaching forward. The day does not need to be extended. There is no more to be added. There is no missing piece. You were here. You moved through it. You gave what you could. That is enough. Let the thoughts slow. Let the breath become soft. Let the weight of tomorrow dissolve into the quiet. You will meet the next day when it comes. But tonight, this one is complete. You don't have to hold it longer than necessary. Living as if today is enough doesn't mean every part of it was easy. It means every part of it was lived. And that's enough to deserve rest, enough to allow stillness, enough to say, I'm here, I'm breathing, I've done what I could. Let that be enough now. Let your body soften into sleep. Let your mind return to the quiet center within you that knows there is nothing left to chase. You are already enough. This day is already whole, and the night has come to carry you into rest. There is a moment, often toward the end of a long day, when your body asks for stillness, when your mind begins to slow, but something inside still feels unsure, as if pausing needs permission, as if stopping means you're falling behind. But the Stoics would gently remind you, you're allowed to stop. Stopping is not weakness. It's a return to balance. They didn't confuse endless effort with strength. They valued focus, intention, and clarity. And they understood that none of those things can thrive in exhaustion. Marcus Aurelius led an empire, yet he still made space to remind himself that the mind must be trained not only in action, but in stillness. Now is the time to rest, he would reflect, not because he was giving up, but because he knew that effort without pause leads to confusion. It leads to forgetting why you began at all. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Not to your plans, not to the rhythm of the day, not to the idea that rest must be earned. You are allowed to stop, simply because you're tired, simply because your body and your mind have given what they could. Stopping doesn't mean abandoning what matters. It means recognizing what matters most. Your clarity, your health, your presence. When you stop and let yourself rest, you're not turning away from life. You're allowing yourself to meet it with care, to return with steadiness instead of strain. The Stoics believed in doing what's needed, but no more than what's needed. They often spoke of avoiding the unnecessary, of cutting out what doesn't serve the soul. And sometimes what doesn't serve you is the pressure to keep going just because the world hasn't slowed down. But the world will always keep moving. You don't have to match its speed. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let your breath become your only task. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not measured by how long you can keep moving without pause. You're allowed to stop. That permission doesn't come from someone else. It comes from within, from the part of you that already knows what it needs, the part that's been asking gently for stillness, even if you've been too busy to hear it. The Stoics would tell you that wisdom is listening to that voice, not overriding it. Wisdom is knowing when the most valuable thing you can do is nothing at all. When you stop, the mind begins to settle, the body begins to soften, The emotions you've been carrying all day begin to unfold, to release, to pass through. Rest doesn't ask you to push them away. It asks you to be still, long enough to let them go. There is a kind of strength in knowing when to pause, when to say, "This is enough." That's not quitting. That's self-respect. It's how you keep yourself from being worn thin by a world that never stops asking. And it's how you make sure that when you do act, it comes from a grounded place. A place that hasn't been drained. Stopping can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to measuring your worth by your output. But the Stoics knew that true worth isn't about how much you do. It's about how you do it. Whether you act from clarity, from calm, from principle. And none of that is possible when you're exhausted. You stop so that you can live wisely, not just productively. Even nature stops. The tides rest between movements. The sun sets each day. The seasons slow, then begin again. There's nothing unnatural about your need to rest. What's unnatural is ignoring it. You are allowed to stop. Even now, as your body lies still, notice the small ways you're still holding on, mentally rehearsing, remembering, reaching toward unfinished thoughts. You don't have to fix them tonight. They'll still be there tomorrow. And if they aren't, they likely didn't need your attention after all. Let them go gently. Let your mind quiet itself, without force. Let your muscles ease. There is no urgency in this moment, only the quiet practice of stopping. You don't need to do anything more. You don't need to add to this day. It's already full. You've already lived it. And now you can let it go. Stopping is not the opposite of progress. It's part of the rhythm of living well. The Stoics understood that clearly. They didn't race toward every moment. They allowed space between moments, because they knew that wisdom doesn't only happen in action, it unfolds in stillness too. So rest now, with no pressure. Let sleep come when it's ready. Let your thoughts become lighter. Let your breath deepen. You don't have to follow another thought tonight. You don't have to carry anything forward. This is your time to stop. And stopping, right now, is enough. The mind is built to notice, to scan, to respond. But not everything it notices deserves to be held onto. Not everything that calls for your attention is worthy of it. The Stoics understood this long before the world became as noisy and fast as it is now. Even in their time, surrounded by political pressures, social distractions, and shifting demands, they practiced the art of selective attention. They reminded themselves, again and again, that peace isn't found by reacting to everything, but by choosing what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about this in his meditations. He would ask himself whether something was truly important, or just loud. He reminded himself that most things didn't need a reaction, that the mind could remain clear and still if it stopped trying to hold every concern, every opinion, every fleeting impulse. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to sort through every idea that rises. You don't need to respond to every emotion or comment or unfinished task. Just because something comes into your awareness doesn't mean it belongs there for long. Your attention is limited. That's not a flaw. It's a fact. And what you give it to becomes your life. If you allow everything to reach you, you will always feel scattered. But when you choose what to attend to, and just as importantly, what to let go, you begin to protect your peace. You begin to feel the quiet return. The Stoics weren't trying to escape the world. They were trying to remain steady within it. That meant turning away from distractions that didn't serve their purpose. It meant noticing a thought, or a piece of news, or someone's reaction, and gently deciding not to follow it. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared about their own mind more. They cared about staying clear, staying focused, staying free. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The tension that builds from tracking every thought, every problem, every open loop, it doesn't help you rest. It only keeps you tangled. Rest begins when you remember that not everything is yours to solve. Not everything is worth your time. Not everything is worth your inner peace. You're allowed to let things pass, to hear them, feel them, even briefly carry them, and then let them go. You don't need to judge them. You don't need to explain why you've chosen not to follow them. You simply don't give your energy to what doesn't deserve it. That includes small worries, the kind that float in late at night and ask for your attention. A missed word, a delayed task, a conversation that didn't go quite right. You're allowed to set them down. The Stoics would see those thoughts for what they are. Impressions, not truths, not facts, just impressions, passing through. They don't need to become part of you. There's a kind of freedom that grows when you learn to ignore what doesn't matter. It's not apathy, it's wisdom. And that wisdom is what gives the mind room to breathe, room to rest. Without that room, even sleep feels busy. But when you let go of what's unnecessary, sleep becomes a return, not an escape, but a return to yourself. Not everything is yours to carry. Not every update, not every problem, not every demand that comes your way. The Stoics were practical. They knew life would always present more than anyone could handle, so they trained themselves to filter, to choose, to say no, not just with their words, but with their attention. And you can do the same. Even now, as you lie back, your mind may still be catching fragments from the day. You don't have to chase them. Let them come and go like the background noise. You don't need to fix them. You only need to notice that they're there, and choose not to give them your full presence. When you withhold your attention from something, you're not ignoring it. You're preserving something more valuable. You're protecting the part of you that needs space to heal, to recover, to think clearly. That's not selfish. That's care. That's the kind of self-respect the Stoics lived by. Let the small things fall away now. Let the conversations fade. Let the decisions wait. Let your mind find quiet in the space you've made by not reacting. There's no urgency here, no pressure. You're allowed to be still. You're allowed to pay attention only to what brings you peace. Your attention is a gift. It is not owed to every passing thought, to every open task, to every voice that reaches you. It belongs first to your well-being. And tonight, your well-being asks for rest. So rest now. Let the important things wait until morning. Let everything else fade. You are not turning away, you're turning inward. You are not missing out, you're returning home. And in this space, where you choose what deserves your attention, you choose peace, quiet, sleep, enough. There are times when the wisest thing to do is nothing. Not because you're avoiding responsibility, and not because you don't care, but because stillness allows you to see more clearly. The Stoics understood this deeply. They lived in a world that, like ours, was full of demands, choices, and emotion. But they practiced a kind of restraint that gave them space to reflect, rather than rush. They knew that action taken too quickly, without thought, without pause, can create more harm than good. Doing nothing doesn't mean being careless. It means choosing not to act out of impulse. It means waiting long enough to see what's really happening. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that reacting too quickly leads to regret. He encouraged himself to sit with a thought, to let it settle, before deciding whether it required a response at all. Practice the art of not being carried away, he wrote, and that art begins with stillness. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Not every situation requires your immediate involvement. Not every feeling asks for action. Sometimes it's enough to notice what's rising and let it pass on its own. There is strength in your ability to pause. The urge to act is natural. It often feels like the only way to find control. But the Stoics believed that the most reliable form of control is self-control, the ability to wait, to watch, to choose carefully. And that ability grows in the quiet, in the moments where you resist the pull to fix, to explain, to solve, in the moments where you allow events to unfold without becoming tangled in them. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to rush toward answers tonight. You don't need to move just to feel productive. Even now, lying still, breathing gently, you are living. You are learning how to meet the world with more calm, not more speed. Sometimes doing nothing is the most courageous thing. It means trusting that everything doesn't depend on your next step. It means believing that wisdom doesn't always come through effort. It often arises from rest. When the mind is quiet, it can sort through things more gently. And when you stop stirring the water, the surface begins to clear on its own. The Stoics weren't passive. They took action when it mattered. But they didn't act to satisfy anxiety. They didn't move simply to avoid stillness. Their decisions came from a place of centered attention, not scattered urgency. They made room for nothing, not as a gap in their purpose, but as a part of it. You are allowed to wait, to watch, to let things unfold without stepping in. Not everything needs your energy. Not everything needs a solution tonight. Some things simply need time. And giving them that time is not failure, it's wisdom. Even now, as your thoughts drift, as your body relaxes into the weight of the night, you are practicing this principle. You are doing nothing. And in doing so, you are giving yourself something essential. Rest, clarity, healing. These don't require effort. They require presence. The mind may still try to pull you forward. It may suggest that something must be done, even now. But you don't have to follow. You can let that thought pass. You can remember what the Stoics knew, that peace is not always found in doing more. It's often found in letting go. You don't have to prove anything in this moment. You don't have to be useful. You don't have to finish anything before you sleep. What matters is that you're allowing yourself to be still. That stillness is not the absence of purpose. It is the return to it. Let everything else fall away now. Let your body feel supported. Let your breath come without effort. This is not a space for action. It's a space for ease, for renewal, for quiet understanding. Doing nothing is not an empty act. It is a conscious choice to let your mind and body settle, to let your thoughts move without interference, to stop the spinning of the day and listen to what remains when the movement fades. So rest here, without guilt, without pressure, without searching for the next thing. The most important thing you can do right now is nothing at all. And that is enough. Stillness is often misunderstood. It's seen as doing nothing, as stepping back, as missing out. But the Stoics saw it very differently. They saw stillness not as weakness, but as presence, as calm control, as a kind of quiet dignity that doesn't depend on noise, speed, or approval. Stillness, to them, was not the absence of strength. It was the shape strength takes when it's fully at peace. They practiced it daily, not just in meditation or reflection, but in the way they carried themselves, even under pressure, even in discomfort, especially in discomfort. To remain still when provoked, to remain composed when the world pulls at you from every side, that is what they admired. Not passivity, but poise. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that it's within our power to step back into ourselves at any moment. Nowhere, he wrote, can a person find a more peaceful and trouble-free retreat than in their own soul. And that retreat doesn't look like hiding. It looks like stillness. A pause, a breath, a soft moment of saying, I am here, and I do not need to move just because the world is loud. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There's nothing to defend here, nothing to prove, nothing to chase. You're allowed to be still, not as a delay, not as avoidance, but as a return to who you are when you're not trying to be anything. Stillness isn't about shutting down. It's about listening more closely. When you stop moving, you start noticing. You hear your breath. You feel where your body is tired. You become aware of thoughts that were buried beneath activity. This kind of awareness doesn't come through more effort. It comes through stopping just long enough to see what's already there. The Stoics valued this inner stability. They believed that a person who is truly grounded doesn't need to rush to respond, doesn't need to mirror the chaos around them. Stillness lets them see clearly, choose wisely, and rest fully. And there's dignity in that, a quiet self-respect that says, I know what matters, and I don't need to perform for the world to feel whole. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore, not to your plans, not to your pace, not to the idea that stillness means doing less or being less. What it really means is returning to what is steady and true. Returning to the part of you that doesn't need constant validation or motion. In stillness, you are no less present. You are no less worthy. You are simply no longer scattered. Your energy is no longer being pulled in every direction. You are choosing to stay with yourself, to honor the moment, to give your body and mind the message that they don't need to be on alert right now. This is not the kind of stillness that hides. It's the kind that stands with quiet confidence, that knows when it's time to pause, that knows rest is not something to earn, it's something to allow. The Stoics practiced this even in the midst of pressure. They didn't wait for silence to arrive. They carried it within them. They knew that you don't need a perfect setting to become still. You only need the willingness to stop, to step back inside yourself and remember that so much of what feels urgent is not, and so much of what matters begins in calm. Let yourself feel that now, the ease of being still, the dignity of not having to react, the peace of knowing that nothing essential depends on you doing more tonight. You've done what you could. The rest can wait. This moment asks for nothing but your presence. Even now, as your thoughts continue to soften, as your breath begins to settle into a slower rhythm, you are embodying that quiet strength the Stoics pointed to. You are not giving in. You are letting go. Not to disappear, but to recover. Not to retreat, but to renew. There is wisdom in slowing down. There is courage in not rushing. There is clarity in stillness. And there is dignity in choosing to rest, not as a break from life, but as part of living it well. So stay here. Stay soft. Let your muscles relax. Let the day slip off your shoulders. Let the stillness hold you, not as an empty space, but as a shelter, as something earned, something necessary, something deeply human. You are here. You are safe. And in this stillness, you are whole. There is a quiet limit within each person, a point where giving more begins to drain, rather than uplift. The Stoics understood this. They lived in service to others, in roles of responsibility and duty, but they knew that without care for the self, even the best intentions could falter. They did not glorify exhaustion. They respected boundaries. They believed that to live wisely, one must also live sustainably. Because you cannot pour from an empty cup. You may feel the impulse to keep going, to offer help, support, energy, even when you're running low. But over time, that selfless effort begins to wear. It becomes less effective, less kind. And the Stoics knew that true virtue, whether patience, courage, or justice, needs fuel. That fuel is rest, recovery, space to restore what's been spent. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look." But that strength doesn't appear from nowhere. It grows when you allow yourself time to refill, when you stop for a while, when you return to your center and give back to the part of you that's been quietly giving all day. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't have to give anything right now. You don't have to fix or carry or perform. It's enough to be here. It's enough to breathe. It's enough to rest. When you care for yourself, not out of indulgence, but out of wisdom, you honor the part of you that makes all the giving possible. You remind yourself that being depleted doesn't help the people around you, that burnout doesn't bring clarity, and that rest is not a reward, it's a requirement. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore, not to the idea that your value comes from constant doing. You are already enough, even when you're still, even when you stop, even when you say, "Not right now." The Stoics were not only thinkers, they were leaders, teachers, family members. They knew how easy it was to lose sight of the self while tending to the world, but they practiced stepping back. They wrote at night, reflected in solitude, walked alone in nature. These weren't luxuries, they were essential practices, moments to refill their cup before offering it again. You may feel that you need to be strong for others, and you do. But real strength lasts when it's cared for, when it's rested, when it's not stretched so thin that it forgets itself. The Stoics didn't see rest as separate from strength. They saw it as part of it. Even now, as your body softens, as your thoughts begin to slow, you are rebuilding that strength. You're tending to something deep inside that doesn't ask for much, just a little quiet, a little care, a little permission to stop giving for a while. Rest is not empty time. It's where you process, where you repair, where your perspective shifts and your patience returns. And without it, even the best parts of you begin to fade. You lose your steadiness, your clarity, your warmth. But when you rest, you refill all of those things. And then, when you're ready, you offer them again, not from emptiness, but from fullness. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion. You don't have to stretch yourself to the edge to be worthy of rest. The Stoics would have seen that kind of thinking as misunderstanding the nature of virtue. Because you cannot practice wisdom, justice, or courage well when you're running on nothing. Those qualities depend on presence, on attention, on emotional balance, and those come from rest. So tonight, let yourself be empty, not in a painful way, but in a peaceful one. Let your thoughts settle. Let your breath be slow. Let yourself stop reaching outward. The world can wait. It will still be there tomorrow. And you'll return to it, more grounded, more centered, more ready to give again, because you gave to yourself first. There is no rush now, no demand, no pressure, just stillness, just the quiet work of recovery. You are not falling behind, you are restoring what was spent. And that too is part of living wisely. You've done enough, you've given enough. And now it's your turn to receive something just as important. Rest, stillness, space. Let that be your offering to yourself tonight. And when the time comes to give again, you'll know you can. Because you didn't pour until you were empty. You paused, you rested, you filled back up. And that is how you care, for others, and for yourself. To the Stoics, rest was not just a pause between tasks. It was a part of living wisely. And sleep, in particular, was something they approached with respect. They saw it not as time lost, but as something sacred, a gift, a return to balance. Sleep was the body's natural rhythm reasserting itself, a space where no effort was required and no expectation remained. In sleep, the mind softens, the body repairs, and the soul regathers its strength. And in that stillness, there is quiet wisdom. Seneca once described how he ended his day by reviewing his actions, not with harsh judgment, but with care. And once that reflection was complete, he allowed himself to sleep, fully, without guilt. He saw it as a cleansing, a step toward peace, and never something to feel ashamed of. He didn't try to resist it, he welcomed it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to earn your sleep by being more useful. You don't need to explain your tiredness or push it aside. You've arrived here at the end of the day, and that is enough. The Stoics didn't believe in wasting energy on what couldn't be changed. And part of rest is recognizing that whatever has already happened today belongs to the past now. There's no more to shape, no more to fix. What remains is the opportunity to restore. Sleep is not what you do when there's nothing left. It's what allows you to begin again, clearer and calmer. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let go of the idea that rest is a weakness. The person who sleeps well is not lazy. The person who honors their own limits is not falling behind. The Stoics would remind you that everything in nature moves in cycles. Waves retreat, trees grow slowly, light fades, and then returns. Sleep is your place in that rhythm, a way to join life rather than fight against it. When you sleep, you step away from constant thought, from identity, from effort. The Stoics practice detachment from things outside their control, and in sleep, you practice that too. You hand the world back to itself. You stop managing, you stop reaching, you let it all be. And something gentle happens in that stillness. Your mind begins to sort and reset. Your body heals, quietly, without your help. Nothing is demanded of you. Sleep is not a performance. It is not something too perfect. It is simply a return. A soft return to yourself, free of pressure. The Stoics aimed to live without disturbance, without being controlled by fear or desire or habit. And when sleep is respected, when it's allowed to happen without resistance, it becomes a form of that freedom. In sleep, you are no longer reacting. You are no longer trying. You are simply being. Let yourself fall into that now, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. Let your thoughts wander, without needing to follow them. Let your breath become the only thing that matters. The world can continue without you for a while. It's allowed to. You're allowed to let go. Even Marcus Aurelius, who carried the weight of an empire, knew that his body and mind needed rest. He wrote of returning to the present, of stepping back into his own soul for refuge. Sleep was not separate from that. It was a part of it. A way to regain perspective and re-enter life with strength. So now, with the day behind you and nothing left to do, let sleep come. Let it take its place as something meaningful, not just something necessary. It is not time stolen from your life. It is part of your life. It gives you back the energy that effort slowly takes away. It restores your ability to live with thoughtfulness, with patience, with peace. You've done enough. You've thought enough. There's dignity in stepping away now, in letting the body be still and the mind settle into silence. You don't need to make sense of everything. You don't need to answer every thought. You're allowed to rest, fully, deeply, without apology. Sleep is sacred because it reminds you that you're more than what you do. It returns you to the quiet, where strength grows again, where clarity begins again, where the noise fades, and all that's left is peace. The Stoics believed that peace could be found not in distant goals, but in the present moment. They trained themselves to stop chasing the future and to stop revising the past. What mattered most was the moment they were in, this breath, this choice, this quiet stretch of time. They knew that if you're always leaning forward, always thinking about what comes next, you miss the life that is already happening. And when rest becomes possible, it begins by trusting that each moment, just as it is enough. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That wasn't meant to create fear. It was meant to bring him back to the present, to this moment. Because this moment doesn't need to be part of a bigger plan to matter. It doesn't need to be impressive or productive. It only needs to be lived. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to carry the whole day with you into the night. You don't need to gather it into meaning. You can simply let it settle, moment by moment, and let those moments be enough. When the mind quiets, it often reaches for something to fill the space, something to solve, or predict, or rework. But the Stoics practiced meeting each moment fully, without dragging it forward or backward. They trusted that the present held everything they needed: right action, clear thought, peace. Not because the present was always easy, but because it was always real. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore, not to the idea that you must make each moment lead to something. Some moments are here only to be felt, to be rested in, to be met with stillness and care. Each moment is enough on its own, not because it's spectacular, but because it's whole. When you lie down and breathe, when you listen and let yourself be still, there is nothing missing. The feeling of being alive isn't something you find later. It's happening right now, even in this quiet. The Stoics were not trying to stop time. They were trying to stop being pulled away from it. They knew that you can move through a full day and never truly arrive in it. But when you stop and notice your breath, the way your shoulders feel, the quiet in the room, you are present again. And presence brings rest. You don't have to finish the day before you can let go of it. You don't have to gather every thought or feeling into something final. Some things don't need to be resolved. They only need to be put down. And the moment you do that, when you stop needing more from this moment than it can give, you begin to feel peace. The Stoics often spoke about the sufficiency of the now. They weren't saying the future didn't matter. They were saying the future would come soon enough. And when it did, it would come as a present moment, not as an imagined story. They focused their energy on what was here, because that's where life happens. Let this be enough right now. This breath, this space, this simple pause. You don't need to plan the next step. You don't need to rewrite the day. You are already here. And that's all that's needed. Even in rest, this moment is whole. Even in stillness, this moment contains all that's required. You're not behind. You're not unfinished. You're simply resting inside the present, where everything slows and softens. Let your thoughts move without pressure. Let your body rest without demand. You are not falling short by being still. You are practicing what the Stoics called freedom. Freedom from urgency, freedom from chasing, freedom from the idea that peace comes later. It comes now, in this one breath, in this quiet stretch of time, in this moment, which is already enough. The Stoics believed that clarity with the world begins with clarity within, that you cannot meet others with wisdom or patience if you haven't first made space to understand yourself. They lived by the idea that the inner life, the quiet place where thoughts arise and emotions are shaped, is the source of all outer action. And when that inner space is neglected, when you move through life without meeting yourself first, your responses become restless. Your energy spreads too thin, and your peace begins to fray. Marcus Aurelius returned to this truth often. Even in the chaos of his public role, he reminded himself that the soul must be centered before the mind could be clear. "Look within," he wrote, "for the fountain of good lies in the soul." He didn't say to look within because the world didn't matter. He said it because without that inward glance, the world cannot be met with understanding. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't have to be ready for everything. Right now, you only need to return to yourself. Not to your plans, not to your roles, but to the part of you that is simply here, present, breathing, still. When you meet yourself fully, without judgment or distraction, you begin to see things differently. You begin to respond rather than react. You begin to notice what matters and what does not. But that insight doesn't appear in noise. It appears in stillness. And stillness only comes when you step away from the need to always be doing. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The expectations, the tasks, the conversations you keep replaying, they can rest now. None of them will find resolution if you haven't yet found peace inside yourself. The Stoics didn't try to manage everything at once. They trained themselves to begin with the one thing always within reach: their own thoughts, their own breath, their own understanding. Meeting yourself means being honest, not in a harsh way, but in a quiet, kind way. It means asking, what have I carried today? What am I holding that isn't mine? What do I need to let go of, just for now? The answers don't have to be perfect. They only need to be noticed. There is strength in that kind of attention, the kind that doesn't need performance, the kind that sits still, listens inward, and waits for what rises. This isn't indulgence. This is responsibility, the kind the Stoics held as sacred. Because until you meet yourself with calm, you cannot meet others with compassion. Until you find stillness, you cannot offer clarity. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to ask less of yourself. The Stoics knew that endurance was not about constant motion. It was about remaining steady, about knowing what is yours to carry, and when to put it down. Even now, as your body begins to soften and your mind starts to drift, you're beginning that return. The return to what's beneath the surface, to the person you are when the day ends and the world goes quiet. You don't need to do anything with that. Just notice it. Just to be here. The Stoics taught that no amount of success in the outer world can replace the value of an examined inner life. You can only face challenges with resilience if you've first faced yourself with honesty. You can only offer calm when you've practiced it in the stillness of your own heart. Let this moment be enough. Let it be the time where you stop moving toward the next thing and simply rest in what's here. This breath, this body, this awareness. You are not behind. You are not unfinished. You are not required to be more than this moment. Meeting yourself means allowing space. It means stepping away from roles and expectations and asking what you really feel, not what you should feel, not what someone else would expect, just what is. The Stoics believed that truth begins in those small recognitions, and that those recognitions shape the way you live, the way you speak, the way you rest. So now, let the world fall away. You don't need to prepare for tomorrow. You don't need to resolve everything tonight. You are doing something important already, coming back to yourself, giving yourself what the Stoics valued most, clarity, presence, and peace. You've met the world today, you've shown up, and now you can rest, not to escape, but to return, to reconnect with the part of you that doesn't change with the noise, the part that is always here, waiting quietly beneath the surface. Let that be your only task now. Let the breath guide you home to yourself. Let stillness be enough. Let sleep come, not because you've finished everything, but because you've remembered what matters, and it begins with you. There are times when stepping forward is the right choice, when action is clear and effort is needed. But the Stoics also knew there is wisdom in stepping back. A wise person, they believed, knows not only how to move with purpose, but how to pause with intention. To retreat is not to give up. It is to return, to gather the self before re-engaging with the world. It is the practice of choosing silence over noise, stillness over reaction, calm over confusion. Marcus Aurelius, who faced unrelenting demands, often reminded himself to retreat inward. People seek retreats for themselves, he wrote, in the country, by the sea, in the mountains, but you have it in your power to retreat into yourself whenever you choose. For him, retreat wasn't isolation. It was an act of protection. It was what allowed him to remain composed, even as the world around him shifted constantly. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You're not required to be everywhere at once. You're not failing by stepping away. You're choosing to preserve what's essential, your clarity, your energy, your peace. A wise retreat is not about running from life. It's about knowing when the mind and body need stillness more than momentum. Sometimes the most skillful move is to stop, not permanently, just long enough to see clearly again, to breathe, to feel, to reflect without pressure. The Stoics understood the difference between running away and choosing rest. They were not escapists. They faced life's duties directly, but not all at once, and not without care. They believed that retreat was how a person prepared for meaningful action, not in haste, not in fear, but in order to return better grounded. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to keep proving your strength by pushing through exhaustion. The strength you need now is the kind that knows when to step back. The kind that lets the world turn without asking for your constant involvement. A wise person knows that not all battles are urgent, that not every conversation needs to be finished in one sitting, that life continues, even when you pause, and that the pause itself is part of the rhythm of living well. When you retreat, you make room for things to settle, your thoughts loosen, your feelings soften, perspective returns. Often, what felt overwhelming before begins to shrink, not because the problem has vanished, but because you've stopped clinging to it. And that is when you begin to see more clearly. Retreat is not withdrawal from responsibility. It is a gentle recognition of your limits. The Stoics didn't avoid difficulty, but they did step away from it when their judgment became clouded. They knew that tiredness leads to poor choices, that a restless mind creates unnecessary suffering. So they paused, they waited, they let things breathe. Let that be true for you now. There is nothing more to manage at this moment. No part of this night requires your involvement. What needs attention will still be there later, and you'll meet it more wisely when you're rested. A wise person retreats without apology, not out of weakness, but out of understanding, out of care, out of a quiet respect for their own capacity. They know that strength, over time, cannot be forced. It must be sustained. And retreat is how that strength is sustained. Even now, as your breath becomes slower and your body begins to sink into rest, you are returning to yourself. You are stepping away not to disconnect, but to restore the connection that matters most, the one between your mind and your deeper sense of calm. This isn't giving up. This is tending to what supports all your effort. The Stoics believed in responsibility, but they didn't equate it with self-neglect. They made time for quiet, for reflection, for rest. And they taught that retreat, when chosen wisely, is an act of discipline, not of escape. Let everything wait now. Let your thoughts rest where they are. There is no conversation that needs to be finished, no task that must be completed before you sleep. This moment is yours. To retreat, to soften, to find the space where you no longer need to try. You've done enough today, you've carried enough. And now, by stepping back, you're doing something important, not leaving life, but making space for it to meet you again. When you're ready, when you're whole, when you've rested long enough to return with calm, not urgency. You are allowed to retreat. You are allowed to rest. And in that rest, you are practicing something the Stoics respected deeply. Wisdom. Quiet, steady, lasting wisdom. The kind that doesn't need to rush to prove anything. The kind that knows when to stop. And why. The Stoics understood that the world is often noisy, not just in sound, but in demand. There are expectations, opinions, interruptions, and constant motion, but they believed that none of it had to reach the core of who you are. They taught that inside every person is a quiet place the world cannot touch unless it is invited in. That stillness is not found by changing the outside world, but by choosing what you allow into your mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this truth again and again. The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do. He didn't say this out of pride. He said it to protect his peace, because he knew how easily the noise can rise, and how quickly we start listening to things that have nothing to do with us. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Whatever came today, the words, the worries, the little interruptions, you don't have to carry them into your rest. You're allowed to set them down without solving them. You're allowed to be quiet, even if the world is still spinning outside of you. The noise isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in the form of thoughts you didn't invite, comparisons that creep in without warning, lists that keep growing, regrets that echo. But none of it is stronger than your ability to return to calm. The Stoics didn't fight every noise. They just stopped giving it power. They stepped back. They remembered what was theirs to control and what wasn't. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You're not responsible for every voice, every message, every shifting moment. You don't need to react to it all. You don't need to keep up with it. Right now, you're not missing anything by resting. You're gaining something more important, your own stillness. Noise thrives on attention, but attention is something you can choose. And that choice, the Stoics believed, is where freedom lives. You are not trapped by what others say or what the world demands. You can listen without absorbing. You can witness without reacting. You can stay centered while everything moves around you. The Stoics practiced this by returning inward, by writing, walking, breathing slowly. They didn't wait for silence. They created it, by removing their energy from what drained them. And in that withdrawal, they found strength. They found clarity. They found a peace that wasn't dependent on the behavior of others. You are allowed to do the same, to not answer the last message, to not finish the thought that keeps circling back, to not worry about tomorrow's questions. The noise can wait. The world will continue without you for a few hours, and when you wake, it will still be there. But you will meet it with a quieter mind, a calmer heart. The Stoics weren't indifferent to the world. They were deeply engaged with it. But they didn't let it pull them away from themselves. They made space between the outside and the inside. That space is where your rest begins, in the gap between what happens and what you choose to hold. Right now, you can let go of everything that isn't inside this moment. The world may be full of voices, but you only need to listen to one, your own. The one that says it's okay to stop. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be still. Even now, with the day behind you and sleep drawing near, you may notice a few thoughts still asking to be heard. You can let them speak without following them. You can hear them without answering. They'll quiet on their own if you stop feeding them your energy. Let the conversation slow. Let your awareness come home. You don't need to be on alert anymore. You don't need to track what's happening elsewhere. You are not disconnected by resting. You are returning to the part of you that stays calm regardless of the noise. The Stoics called this your ruling faculty, your inner guide. It remains clear when you allow it the space to be still. So let that be your only work now. Let your breath be slow. Let your body soften. Let the world drift into the background. There is nothing you must respond to, nothing you must hold, just the gentle weight of your own body settling into rest. Each time you let go of a thought, you make more space for calm. Each time you stop chasing the noise, you return to yourself. And in that return, you remember what the Stoics lived by, that peace is always within reach, not by changing the world, but by choosing your place within it. Let the noise fade, let the silence rise, let yourself fall into the quiet, without trying. There's nothing to do. You've done enough. And the peace that remains is yours to keep. Calm, as the Stoics saw it, is not something to be hunted down. It cannot be forced into existence, any more than you can smooth rippling water by pressing on it. The more urgently one tries to be calm, the the more tension they add to the mind. In attempting to reach peace, they chase it away. The Stoic path teaches a gentler truth. Calm is not something you achieve by striving. It's something that emerges when striving ends. People often misunderstand the stillness Stoics valued. They picture a rigid, emotionless discipline. But true Stoic calm was not the absence of feeling. It was the absence of inner resistance. Calm came not from suppression, but from acceptance, from letting things be what they are, instead of wrestling them into what they're not. If you're lying in bed now, hoping to fall asleep by sheer effort, you've likely felt this. The more you will yourself to relax, the less relaxed you become. The very effort tightens the muscles you're trying to soften. The Stoics knew this feeling, not just at night, but throughout life. And they reminded themselves, tension comes not from the situation, but from the belief that you must do something about it right now. You have power over your mind, Marcus Aurelius wrote, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But that strength wasn't about pushing harder. It was about knowing when to stop pushing altogether, when to allow the moment to be complete, without adjustment. You don't need to try so hard. You don't need to be better at resting. You don't need to prove that you're calm or that you've mastered stillness. Let go of that effort. Calm is not a goal, it's a byproduct. It arises on its own when the pressure is lifted, when judgment quiets, when you no longer need anything to feel a certain way. Trying to force calm is like clenching your fists and hoping they feel loose. The Stoics would have smiled gently at that contradiction. They knew that letting go is not a performance. It's a return to what's already inside. Beneath the tension, there is calm already present. It doesn't need to be summoned. It only needs to be uncovered. There's wisdom in observing without correcting, in noticing your restlessness without turning it into a problem. The Stoics often practiced this through mindful awareness, what they called prosos, the disciplined attention to the present without interference. If the mind was busy, they watched it. If the heart was uneasy, they felt it, and they did not punish themselves for what they found. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore, even if your thoughts are moving, even if your breath is uneven, even if peace feels far away right now. That doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It only means you're human, and still in the process of letting go. There's no need to measure how relaxed you are. No need to fix your posture or perfect your breath. These are tools, not tests. The Stoics were not looking for perfection in their stillness. They were looking for honesty. If a thought returns, let it. If the mind drifts, allow it. There is nothing to correct. Sometimes rest happens when you stop chasing it, when you shift from effort to openness, from how do I fix this to what if this doesn't need to be fixed. That subtle change, letting discomfort exist without resistance, and can ease the very tension it once caused. The Stoics did not ask their minds to be empty. They asked their judgments to be soft. They reminded themselves that discomfort, frustration, even boredom, these are not threats. They don't need to be erased to be endured. As Epictetus said, it's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. So what if you held fewer opinions right now? What if rest didn't have to look a certain way? Let the noise of the world fade for a while. And also, let the pressure to be perfectly calm fade with it. You don't need a silent mind to rest. You don't need a still body to relax. You don't need ideal conditions. The Stoics found peace even in crowded cities, in political turmoil, in cold camps and foreign lands, not because those places were peaceful, but because they stopped expecting peace to come from outside. That's the quiet strength they nurtured. Not the strength to force calm, but the strength to stop grasping, to let things be, to soften the need to improve each moment. If the mind is busy, it's busy. If the body is tired, it's tired. And if peace hasn't arrived yet, it might be waiting just beyond your next breath. You're not doing this wrong. There's no race to the finish, no level to unlock. Just this moment, exactly as it is. The more gently you let yourself be in it, the more naturally calm will arise. Not as something you produced, but something you remembered was always there. So breathe without fixing. Lie still without trying. Let the need to manage everything go quiet for now. The Stoics would sit beside you in this, not correcting, not instructing, just reminding you that calm is your nature, not your project. And you don't have to strive for what you already carry within. In the eyes of the Stoics, value wasn't measured by how much someone achieved in a single day. It was measured by how well they lived, with clarity, intention, and peace. And sometimes, living well means allowing the moment to be simple, without urgency, without output, without the weight of needing to accomplish anything at all. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor with more responsibility than most could imagine, reminded himself that a person doesn't need to busy themselves constantly in order to fulfill their purpose. He wrote, "If you seek tranquility, do less, or do what's essential." He understood that rest isn't laziness, it's clarity, and clarity often requires stillness. In modern life, it's easy to confuse motion with meaning, to think that unless something is being produced, the time has been wasted. But the Stoics knew that effort without awareness is not virtue. They knew that rest is not just recovery from work. It is part of the work. It's what makes meaningful effort possible. Tonight, there is nothing you need to earn, no progress you must make, no goal you must chase. There is no scoreboard keeping track. This time is not empty just because it isn't filled with tasks. It's not less important just because you're not producing something the world can see. You are allowed to rest simply because you are tired. And because rest, too, is a form of wisdom. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You've done enough today, truly, even if the list didn't get finished, even if your thoughts say more could have been done. Stoicism doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. And right now, presence looks like softening the part of you that keeps reaching, keeps measuring, keeps whispering that stillness must be justified. The Stoics believed in duty, yes, but also in boundaries. Seneca wrote that a wise person knows how to pace themselves, that endless striving is not strength, but imbalance. He compared life to a journey. If you rush every step, you miss the scenery. If you never stop to rest, the path becomes unbearable. There is dignity in knowing when to pause, and this pause, this very moment, it matters. It's not a placeholder between tasks. It's not a gap in your productivity. It's a return to yourself. It's a time to remember that your worth is not tied to your usefulness. It never has been. There is no need to justify rest. No need to prove that it's helping something. Even if it accomplishes nothing visible, it has value. Because in this space, your body can breathe, your thoughts can quiet, and your deeper self, the one that isn't defined by what you get done, can simply exist. You don't owe the world your constant improvement. Not tonight. Not in this moment. The Stoics were practical, but they were also gentle. They taught that nature has rhythms, that a tree doesn't bear fruit year-round, that even the sun sets each day without apology. Why should you expect yourself to shine without rest? Let the noise of the world fade for a while, and with it, let the pressure fade too. The pressure to produce, to explain, to justify your rest with outcomes. You don't need to become anything right now. You don't need to accomplish calm or achieve peace or master your thoughts. Just be here. There is no lesson you must extract from the day before sleep. No insight you must squeeze out of your fatigue. Some days end without resolution, and that's okay. The Stoics didn't need every day to be a triumph. They just needed to face each one with sincerity. And they knew that sincerity includes admitting, today I need to stop. So if your mind drifts to what still needs doing, let it pass like a breeze. There will be time. Tasks can wait. You are not abandoning your responsibilities by resting. You are honoring them by not letting them consume you. There is wisdom in recognizing that effort has its limits, that burnout does not serve anyone, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is step away for a while and breathe. You are not less valuable when you're not being productive. You are not falling behind. You are not missing out. This stillness is not absence. It's presence of another kind, a deeper kind, one that doesn't shout but quietly restores. And when you wake tomorrow, you'll bring more clarity, more balance. Because you allowed yourself to rest, instead of trying to earn rest by becoming more exhausted. That is the Stoic way, not to run endlessly, but to walk wisely. Let yourself be still. Let yourself be soft. Let yourself be unproductive. You're not wasting time. You're remembering how to be human. A rested mind doesn't just feel better. It sees better, too. The Stoics understood this long before science confirmed it. To them, the mind was like a pool of water. When it's stirred, agitated, or rushed, everything becomes cloudy. But when it's calm and still, the truth beneath the surface becomes visible. Wisdom doesn't rise out of noise. It emerges in quiet. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the mind works best when it is centered, when it returns to itself. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." But that retreat isn't possible when the mind is overworked and fraying at the edges. Busyness may feel like importance, but it rarely produces clarity. Rest, on the other hand, allows perspective to return. It softens rigid thoughts, lowers defenses, and creates space for understanding to grow. The world tends to reward the busy. It praises multitasking, long hours, and constant forward motion. But the Stoics were not concerned with praise. They were concerned with virtue, peace, and sound judgment. And they knew that judgment is easily warped when the mind is exhausted. A person may still be capable of action when tired, but rarely of wise action. Rest is not escape. It's not avoidance. It is the soil in which clear thought takes root. The Stoics didn't see rest as a luxury. They saw it as a part of a disciplined life. A calm mind doesn't mean a passive one. It means a mind that isn't pulled in every direction by restlessness, worry, or the need to prove itself. You don't have to respond to everything right away. You don't need to carry every thought until it's solved. Some problems lose their weight when you stop clutching them. Some choices become obvious only after you've stepped back from them. A rested mind is not weak. It is better prepared to meet the world as it is, not as panic makes it seem. Seneca warned against becoming scattered and spread thin. He believed that concentration was a mark of strength. But concentration doesn't grow in tension. It grows when the mind is nourished, when it's given room to breathe. Rest doesn't pull you away from your responsibilities. It prepares you to meet them without being overwhelmed by them. Sometimes the most rational thing to do is nothing at all. Not because the situation isn't important, but because you're not ready to face it with your full self. And a wise person knows when that's the case. Not every opportunity must be seized immediately. Not every question needs an instant answer. You're allowed to pause. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, and let your thoughts settle naturally. Don't try to force peace. Don't try to analyze your way into calm. Just let the mind unwind, like a hand unclenching after holding something too tightly for too long. The Stoics believed in readiness, but not in urgency for its own sake. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That includes being willing to step back, even when others continue forward, to rest, even when others keep striving. He understood that strength comes not from constant motion, but from a mind that knows when to move and when to wait. A rested mind can tell the difference between what matters and what simply feels loud. Busyness confuses the two. It turns small things into emergencies and delays into failures. But a calm mind returns everything to its proper size. It becomes easier to see where your energy belongs, and just as important, where it doesn't. You don't need to keep all the plates spinning. You don't have to push yourself to the edge just to keep up. The Stoics didn't glorify exhaustion. They respected discipline, yes, but discipline that sustains, not punishes. And rest is part of that. Deliberate, mindful rest. There is no shame in stepping away, no guilt in taking care of your inner world. If anything, it's a sign of self-respect. A mind that is always in motion will eventually wear down. But a mind that rests, reflects, and recovers, that mind grows stronger, clearer, and more resilient. So tonight, you don't need to solve everything. You don't need to run through your to-do list one more time. The world will still be here in the morning, and your rested self will be better equipped to meet it with steadiness and perspective. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Your value doesn't increase with your level of stress. You don't become more noble by carrying more weight than you can handle. You are enough, even when you are resting, especially then. The Stoics did not ask us to perform. They asked us to live in harmony with nature, and nature includes rest. Look at the way the body breathes when it's left alone. Look at how a field needs fallow seasons. Look at how even the ocean has moments of stillness between waves. Let your mind be like that. Let it settle. Let it drift gently away from the pressures of the day. You don't need to fight your thoughts. Just don't chase them. Let them move on their own. Eventually, they will quiet. Not because you forced them to, but because you gave them permission to go. A rested mind is a stoic mind. Not empty, but composed. Not passive, but prepared. And in that space of quiet, something lasting grows. Strength that doesn't need to be loud. Wisdom that doesn't rush. Calm that comes not from the outside, but from deep within. Let yourself rest, not as a reward, but as a practice. You've earned nothing tonight, because there was nothing you needed to earn. Rest isn't a prize, it's a necessity, and it belongs to you. When the Stoics spoke of returning to oneself, they didn't mean escaping the world. They meant grounding yourself so fully in the present that the noise of the outside no longer dictates the state of your inner life. And one of the most direct ways to do that is something so simple it's often overlooked: to breathe. Breathing deeply brings the mind back into the body. In times of stress, the breath shortens. It rises high into the chest, quick and shallow, as if preparing to defend, to run, or to collapse. But when we slow the breath, when we guide it down steadily into the belly, something quiet shifts. The body remembers it is not in danger, and the mind follows. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that a person's true refuge is their own soul. That no matter what happens, a person can step back into themselves and find stillness there. But many forget the way back. They look for clarity in thought, in action, in answers, and they overlook the breath. The breath doesn't argue, it doesn't demand, it just waits, patiently, to be noticed again. To breathe deeply is not just to take in air, it's to soften the armor we've been wearing all day. The tensions in the jaw, the shoulders, the chest, those ease slightly with each slow breath. And with that softening comes a quiet kind of release. The world stops feeling quite so close, and we stop feeling so far from ourselves. A Stoic life is not about constant control. It's about returning again and again to what we can guide: our thoughts, our judgments, our responses. But even those require space. They require stillness to be shaped with wisdom. The breath gives us that space. It creates room between the stimulus and the response, between the thought and the action, between the tension and the calm. You don't need to fix everything tonight. You don't need to review the day, or plan tomorrow, or solve anything at all. Just let yourself notice the rise and fall of your breath. Let it move through you like a gentle rhythm. Not something to force, just something to feel. Let the breath be what it already is: present, simple, and enough. Seneca believed that philosophy should be practical, not something to recite, but something to live. And part of that practical wisdom was knowing when to stop thinking and start being, when to stop carrying the weight of 1,000 imagined futures and come back to this moment, this breath. Even in times of uncertainty, the breath is a guide. It reminds us of what is real. It reminds us of the boundary between the inner and the outer, between what we can shape and what we must accept. A slow breath is an act of surrender, not of giving up, but of loosening the grip. The Stoics never claimed that life would be easy. They accepted discomfort, loss, and unpredictability. But they taught that peace is not found in rearranging the world. It's found in rearranging our relationship to it. And sometimes that shift begins not with thought, but with breath. You don't have to become a different person in order to rest. You don't need to earn your right to pause. The breath is already here, waiting, offering a quiet rhythm beneath the rush. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, and let yourself feel the ground beneath you again. It's easy to get caught in the mind's loops, revisiting conversations, replaying mistakes, predicting outcomes. But the breath doesn't care about any of that. It anchors you to the only place where life actually happens, here, not in memory, not in worry, here. Each breath is a small act of trust. Trust that you don't need to do more to be okay, that presence is enough, that right now nothing else is required of you. The Stoics weren't opposed to action, but they valued right action, not constant motion, and right action only arises from a calm, centered place. If your mind drifts, that's okay. Just notice, and return gently, not with frustration, but with kindness. the same way the Stoics returned to their journals each day, checking in with themselves, not to judge, but to reflect. This is your check-in. This is your pause. A chance to be with yourself, without needing to perform, explain, or accomplish anything. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let your breath deepen. Let your shoulders soften. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply here. And here is enough. The body understands before the mind does. When you breathe slowly, it listens. The nervous system begins to calm. Muscles ease. The heart rate finds a slower pace. And the mind, which so often tries to lead, begins to follow. This is not magic. This is biology. And the Stoics, even without modern science, understood the deep connection between body and mind. To breathe deeply is to remember that you're not just a thinker, a doer, a planner. You are a being. And beings need rest. They need space. They need silence. So tonight, let that be enough. No need to achieve peace. Just give it room to find you. One breath at a time, quiet, slow, present. In stillness there is clarity. In the breath there is a return, not to something new, but to something forgotten. Your own presence, your own center. Let that be where you rest. Of all the places the mind can go, the present moment is often the one it visits the least. It drifts toward regrets from the past, or concerns about what might come. It revisits old conversations, replays imagined futures, or rehearses what hasn't even happened. And yet, the only place where life ever truly unfolds is here, where your feet are. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus reminded his students that we must confine our concern to what is in our control, and everything else must be let go. The moment under your feet is the only thing you can actually stand on. Everything else is either memory or projection. A wise person returns again and again to what's real, and the real is always found in the present. Being where your feet are means resisting the tug of rumination. It means choosing not to live in yesterday's mistakes or tomorrow's pressures. Not because they don't matter, but because they don't belong to this moment. You are not being asked to solve your whole life tonight, only to settle into where you are, as you are. There's a simple kind of dignity in grounding yourself. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to become someone else. Just bring your attention to the weight of your body, the rise and fall of your breath, the surface beneath you. These small details, the ones the mind usually skips, are the very doorway to presence. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that a person can retreat into themselves and find peace, even in the midst of chaos. But that retreat doesn't require distance. It only requires attention. When the mind stops running ahead, when it stops turning backward, it finds that the present moment is not so bad. It might even be safe. It might even be restful. So much restlessness comes from being elsewhere in your thoughts. When you're lying in bed, but still living inside tomorrow's schedule, you're not really resting. When you're trying to sleep, but reliving an argument from the afternoon, your body is still holding tension from something that's already gone. Peace begins the moment you come back to where your feet are, even if you're lying down. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let yourself be here, in this breath, in this space. You are allowed to step off the timeline of tasks and just exist for a while. Stoic rest is not passive. It's an intentional return to the present. It's not about ignoring reality, but about stepping out of the imagined and back into the actual. Your senses can help you with this. Notice how your body feels against the bed. Feel the softness of the air, the rhythm of your lungs. Let the physical world anchor you. The mind may wander, but the body remains. This chapter of the day has already been written. There is nothing more to add. The story continues tomorrow. Tonight is a pause, not a performance. And in that pause, you can find what the Stoics called ataraxia, an untroubled mind. Seneca often warned about wasting time, but he didn't mean we must always be working or striving. He meant that we waste time when we're not truly present, when we rush through moments, or drown them in anxiety, or ignore the life that's right in front of us. A few minutes of real presence can be more meaningful than hours of distracted doing. Be where your feet are. If your thoughts wander, that's all right. Just notice and return, not with judgment, but with care. Each time you bring your attention back, you're strengthening something quiet inside you, the ability to meet life as it is. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. It will all still be there in the morning. But this moment doesn't belong to the world. It belongs to you. You don't need answers right now. You don't need resolutions or conclusions. Rest doesn't ask you to figure things out. It just asks you to stop moving long enough to notice where you already are. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is nothing at all. Just be here. Let your thoughts pass through without chasing them. Let your emotions settle without resisting them. Let the breath carry you like a slow tide returning to shore. The world can wait. Your presence cannot. And your peace, that small, steady flame, grows brighter each time you come back to it. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom within it. The ability to stay centered in yourself, even as everything else shifts. And that begins with being here, being now, being where your feet are. There is a quiet kind of strength in accepting yourself as you are. Not as you hope to be, or plan to be, but simply as you are in this very moment. The Stoics didn't chase perfection. They aimed for alignment with reason, for integrity, for presence. They taught that our worth doesn't come from the opinions of others, or from the endless pursuit of status or achievement. It arises from something deeper, something intrinsic. You are already enough, not because you've done everything right, but because you exist in accordance with nature. You are a human being, capable of thought, compassion, resilience, and rest. You don't need to add anything tonight. You don't need to improve yourself in this moment. It's all right to pause. It's all right to let go. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again that the soul becomes dyed with the colour of its thoughts. If you are constantly measuring yourself against impossible standards or holding yourself to harsh expectations, you slowly begin to believe that you are never enough. But the truth is simpler and far more gentle. You are not a product to be finished. You are a life to be lived. In a world that celebrates constant productivity, comparison, and self-optimization, it can feel radical to stop striving for more. But rest is not a reward for finally becoming good enough. It's a reminder that you already are. Your value doesn't increase with the number of things you check off a list. It isn't tied to how useful you are to others. You are not a tool. You are a person. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let the need to prove yourself soften. Let the pressure to become something else ease. In this moment, just as you are allowed to feel whole. The Stoics spoke often about virtue, about courage, wisdom, temperance, and justice. But these were not unattainable ideals. They were ways of being that could be expressed quietly in everyday choices. Choosing to rest when rest is needed. Choosing to speak kindly to yourself. Choosing to value your existence, not just your output. These are all acts of inner virtue. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. So much of our distress comes not from what's happening now, but from what we think we should be doing, or who we think we should be by now. But those are moving targets. They can never be satisfied. Peace begins when you stop chasing them. This moment is enough, and in this moment, you are enough. You don't need to carry old mistakes to bed with you. You don't need to solve every problem before you rest. You don't need to earn the right to feel calm. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let yourself settle into your own skin without resistance. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply human, doing your best, and that is more than enough. A rested mind remembers its worth. A quiet moment reveals the truth that's often buried beneath layers of self-doubt. You are already everything you need to be to feel peace tonight. You were not made to live in constant effort. Even the Stoics paused. Even the wisest minds needed silence. So much of rest is not physical. It is the release of internal tension, the dropping of invisible burdens. It is the shift from "I must be more" to "I am okay right now." The body may lie still, but the soul finds stillness only when it no longer wrestles with itself. You are not your productivity. You are not your past. You are not your fears. You are the presence beneath all of that, the part of you that remains steady, that returns each night to quiet, to softness, to truth. Tonight, there is nothing to fix, nothing to perfect. There is only this breath, and the gentle reminder that you are already enough. Let yourself rest in that truth. Let it wrap around you like a warm blanket. You are allowed to stop trying. You are allowed to just be. This is not giving up. This is returning to what is real, to what matters, to what has always been true, even when the world told you otherwise. You have made it this far. You have endured so much. And now you are here, in this quiet moment. Let it be enough. Let yourself be enough. Sometimes the most necessary thing is to stop and allow stillness to settle in, without rushing to explain it or justify it. The Stoics understood this. They lived in a world of duties and responsibilities, but they knew that no one could carry the weight of life without pause. Marcus Aurelius himself, emperor of Rome and burdened with endless decisions, wrote quietly to himself, reminding his own heart that much of what feels urgent is not essential. What truly matters rarely demands haste. The world, with all its noise and motion, can feel like a tide pulling you in many directions. Messages to answer, tasks to complete, expectations to fulfill. It can feel endless. But the Stoics taught that inner peace doesn't begin with doing more, but with knowing what to leave alone. Not everything requires your energy right now. Not everything needs to be handled tonight. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to let the world wait. Seneca once said that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Part of this waste comes from letting the outside world dictate our pace. When you believe that your value lies in how quickly you respond or how much you can handle, you begin to live at a speed that outruns your own peace. But when you slow down, truly slow down, you realize the world does not fall apart when you rest. It simply continues, and you return to it with more clarity, more strength, and more patience. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to answer every demand tonight. Rest does not make you fall behind. It brings you back to yourself. Stillness is not a luxury. It is a form of wisdom. When you choose to pause, to put down the weight of constant activity, you are not neglecting life. You are honoring it. The mind needs space to breathe. The soul needs moments where nothing is asked of it. This kind of space isn't empty. It's restorative. It allows you to remember what truly matters and to let go of what never did. The Stoics understood that time is best used when it aligns with reason. Rushing through life without thought, without rest, without self-awareness is not noble. It is frantic, and it makes you a stranger to yourself. There is no virtue in being endlessly busy. There is no wisdom in burnout. The world will wait. It always has. What feels urgent now, an email, a notification, a small worry, will either still be there in the morning or will fade into nothing at all. And when it returns, you'll be better prepared to face it, because you've chosen to return to yourself first, to meet the world from a place of rest, not depletion. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let yourself be exactly where you are, without reaching, without fixing, without striving. You're allowed to close your eyes without answers. You're allowed to sleep without resolutions. There is peace in postponing what can wait. In the quiet, you might notice something. The world doesn't knock at your door when you rest. It respects your silence. If only you offer it firmly, you set the rhythm. You choose what gets your attention and when. That is power. That is Stoic control. Not over others, not over events, but over your own breath, your own boundaries, your own sense of presence. When the day ends, it is okay to stop. The unfinished task, the message unread, the plan unfulfilled, none of it is more important than your well-being. You are not here to be a machine. You are not here to chase endlessly. You are here to live with intention. And sometimes that means doing less. The wisest people do not react to everything. They pause, they reflect, they rest. And then they act when it is time, with clarity and strength. If you give yourself permission to rest, you are not falling behind. You are catching up with yourself. You have carried enough today. Let your mind loosen its grip. Let your body soften. The world can wait a little while longer. You do not need to earn your rest. You only need to allow it.